Chapter 5. The Kiss of Life. Peter was alone. He walked along the beach as the moon hung low in the sky. The water pushed up the sand with the pull of the tide. He whistled as he walked, picking up stones and tossing them into the water. He stopped near a small cluster of rocks. To the average person, it was just a cluster of large stones sitting on the beach. But to Peter, it was more, much more. His mind was sent back in time. Memories of the rocks, the beach, the cold ocean spraying its foam across his feeble, dying body. It was here he was given the kiss of life. He was just a boy, 15 years old. The ship went down quickly in the storm, though it tried to get to the island. Peter did not remember much of his mother and his father. So many years had fogged his once warm memories. He remembered the storm, the waves, the lightning, the ship going down, the horror as men gave their souls to the sea. He remembered the cold ocean and waking up near those rocks, bleeding and dying. Peter walked a few steps closer to the cluster of rocks and then looked back to the endless dark waters. The ocean, a giver and taker of life itself. He let out a quick sigh, remembering a shadow of a man on the beach as he lay dying years ago. The shadow approached him, said nothing, and bit him on the neck. The smell of the man would always linger in his mind, and his muttering was like that of one of his father's night security. Maybe his father knew and held the man's dark secret, but that went down with him on the ship. After the man fed on him, Peter saw him stagger away, cursing under his breath. His clothing was torn, soaked in the seas, and ragged. Perhaps Peter was not the only one to escape the water's death grip that stormy night. Peter couldn't remember much more in his dying state, but seeing how the man was pale white, Peter thought maybe the man had been aboard his father's ship. Perhaps an Irishman his father hired out of pity. It made little concern now. The man was gone, and Peter was dying. Peter recounted feeling his neck, the burning of a bite, and remembered falling fast asleep on that beach nearly 130 years ago. He sat down next to the large, jagged rocks and ran his left hand over one of them close by. It was cold, wet. This place was his new birth, his new life. He remembered how alone he was when he did awaken to the island, and how alone he was for several months until those creatures of magic on the island accepted him, whether by pity or by luck. Things were better now, however. He had friends, and he had his new family. His old family was lost in the shipwreck long ago. He had very few memories of his first family. It felt so far removed. He looked down at his father's ring that was attached to his thumb. His fingers were still too thin for it to fit. He remembered when his father gave it to him at breakfast before they left the harbor. His mother was not happy about the gift. She said he was too young to wear such a symbol and carry the name, and had hoped to give him the ring on his 16th birthday, but his father chose not to wait. They never saw his 16th birthday, or his 50th, or his 100th. He adjusted the ring on his thumb. It was silver with a ruby, and on the left side, his family seal. He straightened up and laughed a bit, watching the sea. "You won't kill me again," he whispered, "and I will never be alone." He left the pile of rocks and began to walk the beach again. After several minutes, he came to a curve in the island. The shoreline turned and caved inward and opened to a cove. There, in the lagoon, a dozen large ships rested below the water. Some lay twisted on their sides, others stuck in the sand, their rotting large masts sticking up to the sky. Once majestic and powerful, these ships now lay battered and broken, a graveyard in the shallow lagoon. The wind blew a cold breeze, and Peter could smell the salty air mixed with rotting wood. He quickened his pace to the ship graveyard and walked out on a boardwalk that led to the wooden monstrosities. He stood at the end of the pier. He let out a sharp whistle. There was a quick sound of splashing, like a large fish, then much more like a school of fish. There was something in the water. Then came the sound of laughter, splashing, and women giggling. Peter looked into the darkness of the water through the busted ships and saw them. They were beautiful. They shot up from the water, long-haired beauties with their wet hair glistening in the moonlight. These women splashed and danced in the water, and as they did, their long fish-like tails pushed them quickly back and forth. "Ladies, ladies," Peter announced. "Is Naveen with you, or is she out dragging sailors to their doom?"
"Oh, you make it sound so horrible, Peter,"
came a sweet but cold voice. Peter smiled and turned to see her. Naveen was the ruler of the ocean creatures, rich red hair, large breasts, and skin milky white. Her lips were full and soft. She sat resting on a sunken deck with her arms folded on the side of a ship, looking down at Peter.
"I take it you bring good news,"
she purred. "Yes, I am expecting guests in the next few weeks. So I need you and your girls to try not to bring their ship into the harbor."
"What ship? We do have an agreement to work together, but the mermaids need to eat too,"
she said. "I know, and you're all such lovely hosts, but this ship will be a navy vessel. I have acquired a man on the inside to gain rifles, gunpowder, and supplies. We can make our island stronger."
"I thought we did not need such things or cared about them. I thought you just wanted to play. Your quest sounds like that of a man, not a boy,"
she warned. "Very true, but how long do you think we can hold this place as men explore and grow? There is talk of growing the colonies, and with that will come more ships, more men, more opportunity, and we need to think ahead of such foul men," Peter remarked.
"Why, Peter, you imp. You're actually very cunning for a boy,"
she giggled. "I want what's best for the island. So if you could keep away from sinking and devouring any ships that come close in the next 10 days, I will make it worth your while," Peter said.
"We have always kept our partnership, Peter. You protect us from the hunters, the nets, and we protect you as well,"
she replied. "I would feel better if you and your friends in the water on the east side of the island do not make yourself seen, but keep hidden below the ships in case of treachery," Peter said.
"Yes, indeed. If they try to go against their deal with you, we will be ready to feast on their bones,"
she replied. Peter clapped his hands. "Excellent. Now I just need to get back to the cave before dawn."
"You came all this way and will not swim with us? We sank a small ship about 100 yards north. We have not cleaned it or brought in its cargo."
"Well, Peter smiled. The women began to chant to him.
Come on, Peter. Come swim with us. It's been a while since we played. How many humans can claim to swim with the mermaids?
I am not human. Not anymore. But, okay. Let's see what you ladies have done, Peter said, and began to unbutton his vest. The mermaids began to cheer as Peter removed almost all his clothing and dove off into the water, with the women laughing and giggling. Naveen swam quickly from the boat to Peter. They both swam in place as the women encircled them. Do you want to race? Peter asked.
You still have yet to beat me, boy,
she said.
No human and no magical sea creature has yet to beat me.
You cheat, Peter said.
I do not cheat.
Quickly, behind you, a net! Peter cried. She turned to look, but there was nothing. She turned back, seeing that Peter was off like a cannonball nearly 10 yards away, swimming and cutting through the water like a razor.
Peter!
She cried, and dove down into the water. The others followed as the boy vampire pushed hard to the sunken vessel. Peter was only yards away and looked over his shoulder as Naveen and the others were closing fast. He laughed and kicked again. He could see the boat on the ocean floor. It was a newer ship with new paint and a fine mast sitting like a corpse on the sand as fish swam around it. Peter let up for 1 second to admire the ship as Naveen and the others swam past him, reaching the boat. Naveen shook a finger at him as she touched the boat with her other hand. Peter laughed. The mermaids swam around the ship, disappearing into its hull. Minutes later, they emerged, dragging trunks, boxes, and the dead bodies of its crew from their watery grave. One of the mermaids swam to Peter and handed him a small chest. He opened it to reveal silver forks, knives, and spoons. He closed it and put it under his arm. Naveen pointed back to the lagoon, and the group all swam back with their rewards in hand. Peter was the last to reach the shoreline, as the mermaids drug their earnings to the harbor. Some placed new necklaces on one another, others began to show off clothing, and others took the corpses of the sailors and stacked them in a sunken ship for eating later. Peter walked back on the shore with his new silverware.
You will never beat me in the water, Peter, even with your powers.
True, but you will never outrun me on the beach, he shot back.
Who would want to run when they can swim? Besides, I can walk and run.
She swam to the shoreline, splashed her silver and blue tail, and suddenly the tail split as long, pale legs formed. She stood up like a statue and walked several paces on the beach, her streaming red hair covering her pale, naked body. Peter began to put his clothing back on as the mermaids continued to play in the lagoon.
Do you think it is wise to bring men here?
Naveen asked.
We try so hard to keep them away. This island is one of the last places of magic. We here trust so few humans. The fact you are still here after all these decades.
It may not be for long, Naveen. They may visit and leave. I do not want them here, but I need their help. Why do you think they are coming to my side of the island? If the others on the island saw or even heard of this exchange, they may run me and my merry group off. Change has to come. Having more modern weapons of war for protection can be good for all of us.
Just be cautious, Peter. You know how treacherous they can be,
she said, and placed a bracelet on her wrist. She admired it in the moonlight. I know. If I feel wary of it, I will kill them all, and we will feast like kings, Peter said. He slid his black boots back on his feet.
Have you spoken with Wolf Lily?
Naveen asked. Peter paused. His mind flashed for a second. Old memories. You mean Queen Wolf Lily? She has been queen for several years. I've no need to speak with her. The treaty with your kind and her people is still strong, is it not?
She is not my queen. I only look out for the water creatures now. She and I had our differences before you arrived. You know Lily has no tolerance for dark magic. Like that voodoo priestess you saved, or bringing humans on our island. I believe that is the cause of this friction between you.
And how do you feel of her magic? Peter asked.
I do not fear her. Her power is over humans, not us, true gods and ancient creatures. I do not wish her here, however. Remember, it was after her arrival that the elves left for a new land. Oh, and I miss them.
Bah, elves! Haughty, arrogant race of creatures! They never accepted me, Peter fumed.
You're feeder of blood, Peter. You're not a human. In some groups you would be a monster.
Yes, and you and the other sirens eating humans.
They are mermaids, not sirens. Others love to call us that to get under our skin. I do not eat the flesh of man. I am an ancient, not one of the fallen ones, not like the others who swim these waters. When her slave ship crashed into the rocks, and she somehow made it to the beach, I think that was a dark day for our island.
I could not let her die, Peter said.
I know sometimes your heart is stronger than your head. I understand that you may have felt the same when your family came to this island, crashing in the harbor as well. To see a life struggling, I know you saved her.
There was no one else on the ship. They had all drowned. She was clinging to rocks, calling on her gods to save her. I couldn't do nothing, Peter said. Naveen let out a sigh.
We did not know her to be a woman of such dark magic, this voodoo power. She has gotten stronger every year. She takes the magic of the darkness, of the dead from the other side. I fear it is changing our island. I know her being here has changed you and relationships with others.
Peter stretched for a second, took a deep breath, and let out a sigh. He looked out at the water.
I know what you're going to ask, and the answer is still no.
If I had the sword, I could change the world of man, Peter boasted.
I gave the sword to a boy king centuries ago, and Arthur and his band of men, as great as they were, still brought darkness and war. I thought so much of him, and Merlin did as well. But eventually the power ruins the best of men.
But you still have the sword? Peter questioned. She laughed and shook her head.
I cannot give such a created weapon to the hands of mankind again. The sons and daughters of Atom are truly not worthy of our created gifts. I am afraid it is lost to the waters of the deep.
Peter knew she was lying, that she still had the weapon. He adjusted his collar and gave a simple smile. Such stories of power, legends of ancient gods and magic.
You have seen the magic on this island. Why would you doubt it?
The time of magic is fading, and as man grows in number, he will put it out. They will stop worshipping gods, and eventually mankind will become his own gods, Peter said.
If that happens, we will flood the earth again and start over, like the creator of us all did eons ago. Why, he even created mankind.
Maybe he created us because you all rebelled against him, Peter replied.
You, boy, have quite an imagination.
I am not a boy. Do not let my charming, boyish looks fool you, Lady of the Lake, Peter reminded her.
Lady of the Lake sounds so old.
Well, you are quite old, though your body and face show no signs of it.
Ah, charming until the end.
I have to return to my throne room. Dawn will approach quickly. I will send word in a few days of the military ship. Lots of planning and less time to play. For now, Peter said. Peter waved goodbye and picked up his box of silverware as the mermaids cheered and waved to him.